last decade, I've been on a mission to help people find expansion in their lives through holistic well-being, physical, mental, and spiritual. This journey, of course, started within with my own healing and then expanded outwards in my career teaching movement, meditation, and healthy eating, as well as practicing energy and sound healing. Through this journey of self-discovery, I've come to learn that my core purpose is to use my voice to facilitate healing for others. On this podcast, I interview expert guests to share some of the tools, approaches, and thought processes that have helped me delve deeper into what it means to be a spiritual being living a physical existence.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be fine. Yeah, we're just like, awesome. But we're going to be fine.
How funny would it be if I listened back to it and we just sound like a bunch of idiots that don't have any vocab? No, it's not going to be like
we're really intelligent women. We're just like Please release this part. Let this be the intro.
Totally.
Lauren Vaknine was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 2. Her childhood was markedly different from those of her peers as she battled this autoimmune disease, and all the most vivid memories of her childhood are either of or accompanied by the pain, disability, and constant medical treatment that came with this disease. At the age of 18, after undergoing a chemo-based drug therapy, she became severely disabled, wheelchair-bound, facing the possible loss of one eye, struggling to eat or talk. When she was dismissed by her doctor of 14 years as just an unfortunate part of the 30% of people who do not respond well to that treatment, Lauren used her anger to fuel a decision that she would not be a statistic, and that somehow she would figure out how to heal herself. And that's exactly what she did. Of course, it didn't happen overnight, proving the adage, healing is not a linear journey. It took a decade of intensive self-study and absolute dedication to her health. But finally, Lauren went into remission. She now leads a vibrant life as a mother of 2 and shares her extensive knowledge and deep wisdom as a coach, teaching other women how to heal fully in all aspects of life, physical, mental, and spiritual, in her signature course, the Recondition Your Life Academy. Lauren is also a writer and public speaker. Her passion is to show others how to harness their own power to bring about radical change and healing in their lives. But more than all of this very impressive CV, Lauren is a very dear friend, a spiritual sister. It has been a blessing to have her in my life and to call her friend, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share her story with you.
Are you ready? Where shall we begin? Because there are so many different avenues that we could take this. But I think where I'd like to start is for you to just share your background, what you experienced through your childhood and how you overcame that and how it's led you into the career that you're in now.
Sure. Well, firstly, I just want to say how proud I am of you. And it's so lovely to be here. And I'm so glad you've done this. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being an inspiration in so many ways.
Ditto. Okay, my background. It's kind of a long story, so I'll try and condense it a little bit. So I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis just before my 2nd birthday. And lots of kind of things that we've come up with in the last few years or the last few decades, really, that we are aware that maybe triggered it. At the time, my parents had no idea. It was 1986. And I was being diagnosed with what my parents were being told was a chronic long-term illness. So that obviously had a lot of, that came with a lot of difficulty for my parents who didn't know what route to go down. And my parents had never had really done any research into holistic therapies. My parents were, standard kind of working class people. They didn't have any knowledge on any of this stuff. But my mum had this strange niggle in her gut, this just gut feeling that the medications that the hospital were advising. So at the time, they were advising that that the best way to treat juvenile arthritis was to use very, very high doses of oral steroids. Now, doses that high are not used now for children. Even if they are using oral steroids, it's never that high. But that was what the top pediatric rheumatologist at the time was advising. And I happened to be under her in her clinic. For those who are not listening in the UK, we have the National Health Service. So it's, free at the point of entry. We don't pay for it. So wherever you live closest to is the clinic. And we happened to be in this clinic where the top rheumatologist had a clinic. And this was what she was advising. And my parents just didn't feel right about it. And my mum was just thought to put these high doses of steroids into my 2-year-old just doesn't feel right. So she took herself to the library and decided to do a heap of research. And she came out 3 days later and she decided on homeopathy, and she didn't know why. She just knew that it felt right to her because it treated the person, not the disease. And it worked in the way of healing the body from the root cause, as opposed to attacking the body, which, although my mum had no experience with conventional medication, holistic medication, no really real experience in the medical world at all, it just felt like attacking the body, which she didn't want to do. So they took all the money they had and took me to see a homeopathic dietitian. And that was kind of where my journey with all that stuff started. And it was amazing, excuse me, in that we had this sort of access to information that wasn't being seen anywhere else. But there wasn't a wide range of access for information to make it a complete holistic process. So I would go to the homeopath and he would tell my parents what I couldn't eat. So things like dairy, which I'd gone off anyway. So that was my body's innate intelligence telling me. And really highly acidic foods and foods packaged in aluminium, and these things that in the 80s were really kind of fringe at the time. And it was very hard to find substitutes at the time as well. Now you can go into any health shop and get anything. So they had, I went and saw this homeopath, but on the other side of it, my parents didn't have the knowledge about nutrition and everything else that goes alongside. So it wasn't yet what I call a holistic approach, where you really are kind of using everything at your disposal. So my childhood was kind of like I had the illness and it never went away. And next to my school friends, I was noticeably different. And I, in school assemblies, I had to sit on chairs when the other kids were sitting on the floor. And, I couldn't go to soft play parties and stuff like that. But I went to a group physio at the hospital and hydrotherapy with the same group of kids, and we kind of grew up together, and we started noticing differences between me and them. So none of them were growing properly from the steroids. Obviously it stunts your growth, it stops the growth of your limbs and pretty much everything. So everything kind of grows in different it kind of just looks a bit off, and these poor kids just weren't growing, and they were getting joint deformities, which was one of the things that my mum was told that I would have from not taking the drugs, that the arthritis will damage her joints. And if you don't give her these drugs, then her joints are going to get damaged. That was kind of the narrative. It's still the narrative, actually. And we were seeing that I was the one that didn't have any damaged joints. And obviously, a lot of these kids had, big round faces from the steroids. It was very uncomfortable. All these secondary conditions came with it. As we grew up, the girls weren't getting their periods. And all these things to me were happening normally. And I was growing. I was always really tall. So my immune system was kept really strong from the homeopathy. And although we didn't have the answers for everything and the arthritis hadn't gone away, I was noticeably better than the kids who were on the drugs. So we knew we were doing something right, because I was living a fairly normal childhood, laced with trauma as well. I had an associated condition in the eye, which was diagnosed a year after the arthritis. It's called uveitis, and it's a condition that affects inflammation in the eye. And that my parents didn't feel comfortable not giving me the steroid eye drops that were recommended, because we couldn't see what was going on with the eye. It could only be seen through the machines. And my parents felt it was very dangerous, and it was something that they just didn't feel comfortable.
That's actually, can I interject? Because that's actually something that's that I'm noticing now as you're telling the story to me again, even though I've heard it so many times, is I'm sure you must have had this conversation with your mom about what gave her the conviction, other than just her intuition, that this amount of steroids felt like it was attacking to her. It felt like an attack on your body. What gave her the conviction to go that homeopathic route? Because I know as a mom, and I know that you do too, that oftentimes we have that mother's intuition that we need to do something, but when everybody and everything around you is telling you the opposite, it becomes very scary, because then you start questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to cause more harm than good if I take this route instead of that route? So until they actually started seeing the results, that you were noticeably better than the other kids that were taking these high dosages of steroids, what kept her on that path?
Honestly, for me, it's what can only be described as divine intervention. My mum's a really strong woman. You've met my mum, you know my mum. She is just very innately strong. And when I don't know how she kept to it. And I'm writing my memoir at the moment and kind of recounting these situations and really going deep into kind of the inner child aspect of all of this and thinking again, you know, also as a mother now, how did she stay firm in her resolve to, you know, her parents, even my dad was like, do what the doctors say, you know, everyone around her. It's not like she was in a community like ours where everyone is doing the same thing and we're all living really holistically and you've got loads of champions. She had
we've got a lot of information available to us today.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, you've got the mainstream narrative, but there's always access to the other side. And she didn't have that. So she just has a very deep connection to her intuition, and something was guiding her. And there was also another situation, my dad, who is not in any way kind of aware of himself being guided by any intuition. He's just not of that generation. And, you know, he was a market trader. And at the time when my mum decided on homeopathy, he was in the market one day selling his clothes, and opposite him used to be a clothes store also. And this one day it was a bookstore, and it had never been a bookstore before, and it was never a bookstore since. But this one day there was a bookstore and there was a red book. And my dad also isn't the kind of person to, you know, float around bookstores for his leisure. But he said this book called out to him and he walked towards it. And it was called How to Treat Arthritis with Homeopathy. We haven't been able to find that book and can't find it online, and don't, you know. But so that was kind of he took it home to my mum, and I think that they just decided it just felt right. He did get into the fear later on, and, you know, maybe the doctors are right, but she stayed firm. But with the eyes, it was a different situation, and she didn't feel confident enough to not let me at least have the steroid eye drops. And then when things got really bad, the eye used to flare up really badly, and I'd have to have steroid injections into the eye. So that was, you know, one of my formative traumas, I would say. And that happened quite a few times, and steroid injections into the joints as well, and draining of the joints. And I'm actually working through some of those traumas now. You know, things kind of crop up years later that you thought you dealt with, and you start realizing how these things affect you on a deep level.
It's a lot for a little person to go through.
Yeah. So it's, you know, but the important thing is informing ourselves on our trauma. So that's kind of how it went. And then my teenage years were really stable. And the doctors had said when I was younger that the arthritis sometimes burns itself out by adolescence. And so my parents thought that that's what was happening. I kind of didn't give it any thought. I was like, I'm okay. And I've just realized that in primary school, I was really different to everyone else. And right, I can't be different now. And I'm in high school now. So, okay, main objective, fit in, be normal. And so that's when that whole thing started. And it was just everything I did was based on the objective of fitting in. Every action, every thought, everything, from who I was friends with to what clothes I wore to how much I ate. And obviously that was my thing of control. So I'll just stop eating because I need to be really thin to prove that I'm normal and pretty. And then boys will like me, and then I'll have some sort of acceptance, and I'll be able to know that, okay, I'm all right. I'm normal. And obviously that never goes down too well. So that was the teenage years. And then I was very stable for a long time, about 4 years. And then I left school to go to performing arts school. And in the second year, just out of the blue, my knees swelled up and I started experiencing pain. And we went back to both the rheumatologist and the ophthalmologist. And it turned out that in my eye was growing cataracts, one over the other, because of all the years of the steroid eye drops and the steroid injections. And there was so much inflammation in the eye that they couldn't operate to be able to take the cataracts out. So they said that this is really dangerous and you need to go on this specific drug right now, because if we can't get those cataracts out, because the inflammation is too high, then you're at risk of losing your eye. It was pushing against the optic nerve and the pressure was really low. And I was kind of 17 going on 18, and it was really a horrific time. And I decided, oh, well, you know, what's this homeopathy done all my life? It's obviously done nothing, because look where I am now. Because, you know, I had that teenager mindset, and I was also in a real stage of rebelling against everything and everyone in order to try and just, I could feel what was happening. I knew that disability was looming. You know, I could feel what was, my life was about to change. And I had this whole social circle, and I was going to be an actress, and, you know, and then I knew it was coming to an end. And so I was just rebelling in any way I could. And then had a very difficult few years in that sense, and doing drugs and in with the wrong crowds, and just suffered a lot of different traumas. And then when this medication was offered to me, which was a chemo-based drug, I said, yeah, you know, the homeopathy has obviously done nothing, and I'm an adult now and I can make my decision. And my mum really didn't want me to take it, but I decided to do it. And before taking that, I had arthritis in 4 joints, the knees and the ankles. I started taking that drug, started getting sick very, very soon. I felt unwell, really unwell, very bloated, felt sick, had ulcers, like my mouth was filled with ulcers, started losing my hair. Wasn't aware why I was feeling so unwell. It turns out that my liver was being damaged by the drug. And within 10 months of taking it, the arthritis had spread to every joint in my body. So sorry, I keep clearing my throat. I'm just at the end of a cold. Okay. So apologies for that. So yeah, by the end of that 10 months, 18, I was then in a wheelchair. Literally couldn't move, couldn't feed myself because I couldn't bend my elbows, couldn't walk, couldn't sit up straight because my hips were too stiff. And my mum wheeled me in a wheelchair to the rheumatologist who had known me since I was 4, who took over from the one who had diagnosed me. And she called me Laura instead of Lauren, and told me that for 70% of people this drug works, and for 30% it didn't. And that was it. That was her understanding of it. She didn't bat an eyelid that I was in a wheelchair. She called me Laura. And I went mad. And I was only 18, but I had this inner knowing at that moment that I am not a statistic. And there must be more to how health and medicines and this system works than statistics. There must be more to it than this. Surely there's an individualized approach. Surely there's a reason I reacted like this. And there was the whole genetic situation, you know, that I only found out years later and understood that someone with genetic polymorphisms that I have should never be put on that drug. And also they put you on synthetic folic acid alongside it. So totally damaged my liver. It took me a long time to heal that. But essentially,
when the drug was offered to you at the age of 17, 18, were the risks explained to you? Because
they said, you know, it's a chemo-based drug. And, you know, they give you the package insert. Here's the long list of things that could happen. But I wasn't talked through it in, let me sit and read this package insert with you. It was an understanding that it was chemotherapy. But, you know, you're going to start on a low dose and it's taken orally. So it's not like you're having infusions, which was then offered to me after that as well, which I didn't take. And I guess it was explained to an extent, but my understanding of it, my truth is that I don't believe the doctors themselves fully understand all the nuances to medications, to any conventional medications that are given, based on the fact that it's not given on a personalized basis.
Yeah, because it just, obviously to think of losing your eye is such a major thing, and it would be terrible to lose an eye. But when you weigh it up to what happened to you as a result of choosing that drug, it seems a very extreme approach to take to saving an eye if you then end up fully disabled and in a wheelchair.
Yeah. And like I said, my rheumatologist didn't bat an eyelid at me being in a wheelchair, and I realized,
which means she'd obviously seen it before.
This is normal to her. Yeah. It's normal to her for people to decline like this as they get older with this disease, and that's not going to be me. So that was the decision I made at 18, that wasn't going to be me. And I essentially just set out on a journey to make that happen. And it was not a linear journey. So it wasn't like at 18, right, I'm going to get well, and here I am. And this is going to happen. I had no idea how really to do it. I just knew I wasn't going to take conventional drugs again. I knew that that my childhood using homeopathy and herbs had played a huge part. I now understood this, and I knew that I had to find a way to heal my body. And so I started meditating as a first thing, because a friend of my mum, who was a healer, brought around a Brandon Bayes tape. I literally think it was cassette tape. And I played that and did Brandon Bayes' journey, and that was my initiation kind of into meditation. And then we found a doctor in Israel who a friend of my mum's had seen, who was a doctor who had studied in China and had created a therapy called Ipec Therapy, which is integrated physical emotional clearing. And it combines 7 different types of integrated therapies into one. And so I moved there to stay with family. And I was literally, my dad took me there in a wheelchair. And after 5 months, I was really like nearly back to normal. It was amazing. But there's a huge but. I came back home and I was just angry that I'd lost 2 years, more than 2 years, but really 2 very difficult years. I was 20 now. And I just wanted to work and to have fun and to party and to just be young. All my friends had gone to uni and gone traveling, and I had to give up my place at university and all of that stuff that I'd wanted to do. So now I just wanted to live. So a year later, the arthritis came back like with a bang. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I needed that to happen to show me that no one else could give me my health. I couldn't outsource my health to the doctor in Israel or to doctors here or even to a homeopath or a herbalist or a naturopath. They could help me, but it had to be me. Like I had to make a decision to actually take my healthcare into my own hands and create a holistic approach to do that. And that's when I really started immersing myself in intensive self-study, in everything to do with what makes the human body and mind work and not work. And it really was a journey from there, learning about everything from epigenetics, which was a huge part of my learning, really learning about my genes and my genetic predispositions and what that meant, why that meant that the drug had affected me so badly, what foods I would eat based on that. That led me into nutrition, studying about nutrition, neuroplasticity, meditation, deepening my spiritual practice, trauma, learning how to work through my trauma. I mean, everything. And it really became understanding that no one thing in isolation is ever going to work. And I need to really implement healing for all aspects of self, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, if I wanted to heal. And so that's what I do today. And I guess I've left out the punchline, which is I went into remission 10 years after coming off that drug and making a decision to get better. So I went into remission kind of nearly 9 years ago now. It had been much better for a long time. So as I was doing all this work on myself and I was healing, things were getting better. But until I really kind of got to that point of there's no signs of this disease anymore. That was 9 years ago.
If you find value in this episode or any other episode and would like to support me in getting the podcast out to a wider audience, you can make a donation. Currently, I'm not trying to make a profit from doing this podcast, but I really do believe in the ideas, people, and different healing modalities that I'm sharing with you. And I would love for more people to be able to benefit from it. Of course, there are other ways you can also help me. Share your favorite episode with as many people as possible and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening. This both gives me feedback so I can continue giving you more of what you like, and it serves to improve my ratings on the platforms. And honestly, I would just love to hear from you. I so deeply appreciate every message of support and thanks that I've received, and it really touches my heart when I hear that the content has been meaningful for you. Go to my Instagram account, click on the link in my bio, and find the tab labeled Support the Podcast. You can donate as little as $5 or even less by entering a custom amount. Any amount will be greatly appreciated, and once I reach $100, I can use that for marketing the podcast and getting this info out there.
Yeah, because I remember when we first met and became friends, you still had arthritis and you would have occasional flare-ups. It was sort of managed, but it was still a thing. And I remember you had a bad flare-up at your wedding, just before your wedding, and you got married in a wheelchair, right?
Well, I walked down the aisle and I managed the first part of the wedding, but then they put a chair on the dance floor for me. And I was wheeled home, wheeled back to the taxi after the wedding in a wheelchair. But I think like I don't resent that now, looking back on it, knowing how severe things were. It's almost makes you more proud, I guess, to see the contrast of like how bad things were to how great they are.
Yeah, and I can actually see that in you as you talk about it, that there's no bitterness anymore. Whereas I think, because we have been friends for such a long time, I've seen how that has changed. And it's specifically in the last couple of years that I can see you've been doing the work on resolving that trauma. And now when you speak about your journey, I can see that you just appreciate every part of it, despite how incredibly difficult it must have been. And I think what's so powerful about your story is exactly what you said. You reached that point where you realized that the only person who could do it for you was you. And that's what I love about listening to your story, is hearing how you got to that point, and then you just took control of every part of your life. And I really deeply believe that that is the future of medical care, and that when we as a society, not just as fringe people, when everybody can get to that point where doctors are working together using all the different integrative holistic methods to really address health from that mind, body, and soul aspect, that's when, we'll, as humanity, we'll be able to go to our next level, because there'll be so much less energy spent on dealing with sickness that we'll be able to have this higher standard of wellness in our communities. And then we can apply more energy to other pursuits, such as increasing our consciousness and, coming up with better ways of living.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think we've come up with all those ways. It's just a case of, are they going to be profitable? All those ways are already available to us, and including health technology. Like, think about health technology. And when I say that word, majority of people might think about, new technological advancements. But for me, the best health technology is the ancient wisdoms, the homeopathy, the Ayurveda, what the land has given us, a connection to self, nutrition, the right water, and resolving trauma, because we know trauma sits in our meridian system, and until we clear that, there can't be any wellness. So that's why it's a complete holistic approach. And I do think we already have access to all these answers to health. It's just a case of when everyone else joins us, fringe people, as you called us.
Fringe hippies.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love for you to expand on trauma, because you've mentioned the word quite a few times, and it's something that we have chatted about before. And I always found it very interesting to think of how you grew up with this condition, which in itself comes with all the physical ailments. But then in addition, you've had physical issues as an adult that were actually a result of the trauma that you experienced as a child, having to go through all those treatments, experience all that pain.
Yeah. Trauma is a really interesting one. And I think what we need to spend so much time on in our healing journeys. So when people come to me with anything, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever it is, we take the same approach to healing. And that really starts with inner child work and resolving, looking at trauma, informing ourselves on our trauma, honoring it, understanding it, processing it through our bodies, really kind of unearthing anything that could have been traumatic, whether that's, the little t or big T traumas. For me, there were, like I said, there was an instance when I was 8 years old, and we were going to Disney World, Florida. It was a massive trip. This was something every kid wants to do. And a few days before, my knees swelled up like balloons. Like it was bizarre how quickly it happened and how severe it was. Equally not bizarre, my mum says that my whole life, every time there was something to look forward to, I would have a flare up or I would get a migraine or something would happen. And I now understand that, my mum always used to go, oh, it's psychosomatic. And I would get angry and triggered by that comment because I didn't understand the meaning of psychosomatic. I just thought she meant I'm causing it by telling my mind that there's, and I didn't. And now with the understanding more of how the mind works and psychophysiologic aspect to pain, it's a way of the body protecting itself. Oh, we need to go on a plane somewhere really far away. That could be dangerous. Let's put the brakes on. So my knees swelled up. We went to the rheumatologist on the Friday. We were due to fly on the Monday. And she said, you need to drain these knees. They're too full of fluid. And usually we would book her in for a sedation, but we can't sedate her here if she's not booked in. So we can either book her in for next week and you don't go on holiday, or we have to do it right now with no sedation. So they look at me, this 8-year-old, and they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, thinking about it now, like I'm fucking 8 years old. Don't put that on me. But it was put on me. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need to be brave because otherwise everyone's going to miss out on Disney World. So I had my knees drained with no sedation at 8 years old. And for anyone that's listening that's ever had that done, it's one of the most just painful, but the discomfort of it, as it's this massive needle and it just kind of like moves around inside you, up and down and back and front to try and get all this fluid. And once one knee had been done, I still knew what was to come with the other knee. And really, I needed to just sleep for a week after that. But then on Monday, we were on a plane. And, so I think that that's been something that I've been processing, in the understanding that because that hasn't been processed, there is a lot that comes with that. Do you know what? I've completely forgotten your question. There was a specific question about trauma.
I was saying how we've spoken about how some of the physical ailments that you've had as an adult actually boil down not to the rheumatoid arthritis itself, but to the trauma that you experienced as a result of having juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And going
so
through
which
those
situations are you pertaining to in particular?
Well, I know you spoke about the trigeminal neuralgia that you had.
Yeah. So there's so many situations that we can look at and go, okay, what's the root? Because I'm all about root cause healing, root cause personalized approach. And sometimes things will crop up and I'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake, another thing I need to deal with. But I love that your cat's just jumped up. There is a root cause to everything. So the arthritis I was diagnosed with was called juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and idiopathic means no defined cause. Okay. And I really resent that because I now truly have, this, not a belief, it's my truth, that everything has a defined cause. I mean, we know the catalyst that triggered the autoimmune response in me with the trigeminal neuralgia, there had been so much. So after the drug that I took, the arthritis went to the jaw. It went to every joint, and the jaw joints were included in that. And there was so much, the jaw is such an integral part of our being in terms of how we communicate, how we eat food. Like, it's just so important for it to work. And I'm a communicator. I always have been. I'm a sharer. I like to talk. To be 18 and not be able to talk properly and not be able to chew food, I think that aside from the physical aspect of it, there was a lot of emotional trauma carried in the jaw, the tension of that situation, the tension of the difficulty, the adversity of it as a teenager, like, just really was carried in my jaw. And it's taken so much healing to kind of release that and I still work on it every day with my jaw. It's such a challenging area for me. But yeah, years later, I had this trigeminal neuralgia that got triggered as a result of many things, as everything always is. It's multifaceted. But essentially, yeah, I think it was trauma carried from the tension that I carried in this area of anger and resentment and so much other stuff.
You mentioned that your mom used to use the word psychosomatic, and that would make you angry. I think that's a really interesting point to bring up, because, say, for example, when we say that you realized that nobody else was going to save you and it was up to you, I think when you say that, people can get angry, because then they take it as an accusation, like, oh, you're sick because you made yourself sick.
Right.
So let's get into what that really means when we say that, and that it's not like you consciously chose to get sick or you did this to yourself. But when we can come to that place of realization, we're giving ourselves so much power to address whatever is wrong in our lives, not just being sick, but other things as well.
Yeah, I love this topic because it's what I call abundance consciousness. Like, we can operate from victim consciousness as much as we want, because we see ourselves as being a victim, and we have been a victim of something. That's the truth. That's the fact. But if we continue to operate from the victim consciousness of this has happened to me, and all these things always happen to me, and woe me, my life is shit, and why? And someone else needs to help me fix it. It's a normal response, but it's not going to help us. That's where I was operating from for a long time, for most of my life. I don't think I ever said the words out loud, why me? But I'm pretty sure that victim consciousness was the place that I existed within. And so, yes, if you say that to someone, it can be very triggering. This idea that you can feel that means that, we brought it on ourselves. Now, even that is so nuanced, because did we bring it on ourselves? Well, if you want to go really deep into the metaphysics of it, there is an argument that everything is energy, and the energy that we create and that we put out is what comes back to us. So a lot of the health situations that we face are, in essence, a result of our own energy field and what we're putting out. So I think there is that element. But equally, it's not a you've done this and you need to fix it kind of thing. It's we just have this one life in this one body. I mean, we have loads of other lives, but let's just focus on just this one life for the moment. Don't want to scare people. And we have an opportunity to honor these bodies we've been gifted. And I think that the modern healthcare, or I like to call sick care narrative, is live your life however you like, and then when something happens, come to us and we'll give you a pill. And also there's all these vaccines which will help you prevent something, but don't do anything yourself to prevent them, because we'll do that for you. So when we get into that idea that ideology of I don't need to do anything for myself because there is a state here that will provide this all for me, that's when we've shifted into this convenience living over the last 30, 40 years. This convenience, generation. Someone else needs to do everything else for me, to how I birth my babies, to how I feed my babies, to how I, grow food, cook food, prepare food, what's on my table. Has that been a convenient meal? Has it been something that I've put thought into about my health? So I think this really comes down to the idea of how do we take responsibility for our own well-being, knowing that it does come from us, not from elsewhere. And just stepping back and thinking, okay, well, if I'm triggered by this comment of, someone saying, well, you're operating from victim consciousness, again, also asking, why am I triggered by that? And this is a huge part of the healing process, is learning to look at our shadow, learning to look at the things that trigger us. Because before we step into that work, we tend to get triggered by things and think that it's something else or someone else that's triggering us. But actually, all triggers are just a reflection of our own fears or difficulties or our own shadow self. And instead of shying away from something difficult, from a difficult emotion, whether that's something triggering that someone said to you or something difficult has happened and I'm going to distract myself and not think about it. We do all these things as opposed to tackling it, looking at it head on and going, okay, this is difficult, but okay, I'm going to look at it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to face it head on. I'm going to look myself in the mirror and I'm going to see, why is this triggering me? And a lot of the time, when you really look at it, it's because then we feel a guilt. And we have to keep digging away, peeling away at these onion layers of, okay, then there's the guilt. What's underneath that? Because the guilt comes as like it, when I talk about vaccines, we've done a lot of digging. Can I talk about that here?
Depends which direction you're going to take it in, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the digging that I've done in, recent years has, we kind of saw the direct correlation between me having the measles rubella vaccine and the arthritis being triggered. So looking at that, my mum didn't go, well, no, it couldn't be that. She's looking at it and going, okay, that could have been that.
Which is an option, I think, especially as a parent. You don't want to look at something and go, oh my God, I gave that to my child and that caused that. So I think for a lot of people, it would be much easier to just ignore it. And I think that is what happens so very often. So good on your mom for looking at it and going, well, okay, fuck, that's what happened.
Well, yeah, because, listen, we only found that out years and years later. But that's what I mean. Like, when people are faced with that, we could move into the state of guilt if we don't ignore it and go, no, don't be silly. That's all fine. And that's a difficult thing as parents, especially. We don't want to think that we've caused any harm to our children. And so I think it's a case of taking away this idea of we have done this. We have caused harm to our bodies or our children. And just, this is what we knew at the time. This is what we know now. How can we step forward in the right direction without being triggered by it and learn from, these challenges that we face and move forward in the right direction?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that I've really been noticing lately. When you talk about the type of lifestyle that we choose to live, sometimes people get very offended by it. Because even though you're not saying anything about their lifestyle, they take it as an attack on their lifestyle. Like we're saying, you're making bad decisions or you're hurting yourself. And I think it's really important for everybody to recognize that you can only do the best that you can in that moment with the information that you have and the emotional maturity that you have and the capacity that you have for critical thinking in that moment, considering whatever stress you're under, like, for example, your child being sick.
Right.
And when you learn new information that says, oh, I actually made a bad decision back then, rather than beating yourself up about it, just go, okay, great. Well, now I can educate myself on this and moving forward, I can make a better decision.
Right. And I think we're seeing that a lot more now.
Yeah,
I do think there still is this element of guilt and avoidance because also the alternative is a lot more challenging, right? The lifestyles you and I lead, it's not convenient. It's not in any way convenient. And sometimes people can look at that and go, I can't deal with that right now. And if that's their journey, then okay, then that's fine.
And that's completely understandable. I mean, I've been there myself more than once, because unlike you, I think we've chatted about this before, you know, your body has this sort of like very sensitive and immediate response to anything. So your body tells you very clearly when something's not right for you. I have developed a very deep relationship with my body where I can listen to its signals, but I don't get sick. Like, I'm not allergic to anything. I don't have any intolerances. The way that I live is really just my choice, because I want to be as healthy as possible. But what it does also mean is that there's a lot of leeway for me. You know, I can eat unhealthily and, you know, stop meditating and not train and not do all the things. And I won't feel great, but I don't get sick from it. And obviously there are times in life where I have other stresses, other factors that are weighing very heavily on me or taking up a lot of time or whatever it is. And then I might go towards the convenience. So I fully understand when somebody says to me, especially like a working mom says to me, I don't have time to do this shit. I get it. I understand. But once you experience living like this and you experience the health and the vitality and the energy and the joy and the peace and the fulfillment that comes with not only healthy eating and taking care of your body, but taking care of your mind, taking care of your soul, you don't want to live any other way. And that actually kind of brings me back to a point that I wanted to make. You know, you brought up this thing where people say, like, why would I want to do that? Or, you know, why would I want to put so much effort into that? And it frustrates me when people say, I want to enjoy my life.
Right.
I don't want to eat healthy. I want to eat food that I enjoy. Or I want to drink and party. I want to enjoy my life. Cool. That's your choice if that's what you want to do. But I don't think people really understand how much more fully you can enjoy your life and how much more joy and satisfaction and fulfillment there is to be found in your life when you change your lifestyle to focus on different things.
Yeah.
And are you really enjoying your life when you're out drinking every weekend? Why do you have to go out drinking every weekend? Is your week so shitty?
Let's look at why.
Yeah. Is your week so shitty that the only thing you can look forward to in life is getting completely smashed on the weekend? If that's your choice and it's what you want to do, that's cool, but there's another way.
I learned this a lot through Daniel, my husband, who I recorded an episode with on my own podcast. And we spoke about his journey to this because, you know, all these things that he used to say to me, I don't want to read books. I don't want to meditate with you. I don't want to go to this place. I'm just, you do your thing and I'm not interested because I want to live my life. I like to come home from work and relax with a joint or a whiskey or, you know, it took the deep inner work for him to realize that what he was doing was numbing the dissatisfaction he had with his life. So there's a really fine line between enjoyment and dissatisfaction. If the enjoyment isn't coming from a conscious place, if we don't really understand, you know, so happiness, the word happiness or joy, and I prefer to use the word joy to happiness now, but the word happiness to me holds a very different meaning to what it used to mean.
Yeah.
And again, everything's multifaceted. Like, I do believe that we've been gifted these human bodies and all the senses we have, like the 5 human senses, you know, forget the other ones that we have, and they do need to be indulged and indulged in a conscious way, right? And appreciated. And yes, we can, you know, if you really love your morning coffee and you are drinking that coffee consciously, the caffeine doesn't affect you badly and it's a conscious decision. And that is what gives you joy to make that coffee. You make it with intention, you drink it with intention, have that morning coffee. When it becomes 7 coffees and it's walking into Starbucks, giving them £4 for a coffee, walking out, drinking it without even understanding your need for it, that's a different situation. So it's looking at what is joy, what really fills me with joy, what really fills me up, you know, genuinely. And I think that it's really difficult for us to know the answers to that until we do this inner work. Because the things that we think make us happy aren't really the things that make us happy. And I always talk to clients about, we have to nourish our bodies, but we have to nourish our souls as well. So there is this kind of argument for living an 80-20 lifestyle, that on the weekend, you want to have a glass of wine. It's your birthday, you want to have some chocolate cake that has got gluten and sugar and all the things, like whatever. But eat it with that consciousness of enjoying it without the guilt, because that guilt holds a very low vibrational frequency as well. So if you're going to have it, do it with intention. Do it with this joy of, wow, how fortunate am I that I get to eat chocolate cake on my birthday? And, and so it's just all these little nuances to what joy actually means for me nowadays. It means something so different. And I do think that when people can acknowledge that there is a level of happiness, because the thing that I see most in my work, I get a lot of women who have suffered trauma and health complaints and all sorts, but the thing that I see the most is the women who live in what I call the no man's land of, I'm not unhappy. I'm fine. Fine is my most hated word. And I don't ever want any of my clients to tell me they're fine. And I don't want anyone ever to tell me they're not unhappy. Because that's not what life's meant to be about. We're not meant to live exist. I'm not going to say live, exist in the state of, I'm not unhappy. Like, we're meant to experience this life in all its ups and downs, in it, the entire spectrum of human emotion. Like, that's what we're here for. But we numb ourselves to the point of stagnation. And that's when we become unhappy.
Yeah, you just like taken us into, I don't know if anybody's watching on video, they might have seen the excitement on my face, because this is a topic that I'm so passionate about, because I think that a large majority of people live in that no man's land of being numb to what it really is to be human and to be able to experience emotion, because people are so afraid of what we label as the bad emotions that they also block themselves off from feeling what we label as the good emotions. And so they live in this no man's land where they're numbing themselves to the dissatisfaction and whatever is not right in their lives. But then you're also closing yourself off to experiencing true joy and ecstasy and like the highs of life. And that's why I think doing the inner work that we keep on mentioning is so powerful, because your capacity for going into those deep emotions, the dark emotions, and healing your traumas, going there creates an equal capacity for going into the heights of joy and bliss and peace and fulfillment. And that's when life becomes really beautiful. And then coming to that place of acceptance that there is no being constantly happy.
Right.
Like, and I'm specifically using the word happy,
expanding,
not joyful, because as you just brought up, like there are two different things. There's a very big difference between like being happy and actually experiencing joy. Joy is such a deeper experience. Yes. And that's what we really want to find in life. So accepting that you can't just be constantly happy. You can't just always be fine.
Right.
Life is up and down, and there's always going to be something happening, some catastrophe or some stress in your life. But when you can accept that everything's constantly in flux, constantly changing, this too shall pass, then it makes it easier and less scary to accept the bad times and to go into those darker emotions and not be afraid of them, because you've already been there and you can come out of it, and that on the other side there's going to be joy again.
Absolutely. Like the universe is always expanding, therefore everything is always changing. And I have to tell you, this was a really difficult lesson for me. I'm a Pisces, and so by nature water is like flowing all the time, but for some reason I am not someone that liked change. If things were a certain way, I wanted them to always, even now I find it hard to think about amazing things, like nostalgic memories from my childhood and the way things were, and to look at how they've changed. But it's been a huge part of my journey, understanding that is the nature of life. Nothing ever stays the same. So this too shall pass applies to the happy stuff as well, applies to the good stuff as well. Something I do with my clients, and something that's been a massive part of my journey, has been really learning how to sit with my emotions, but how to honor them. So I created a process called Honoring and Connecting with Your Emotions, where it's a 6-step process to really acknowledging the emotions. So if something difficult happens, and, you know, we tend to either distract ourselves to keep busy, you know, to not think about it, or, you know, people are like, no, I had a cry and now I'm fine, I'm going to move on. But we haven't actually processed it. So where is that emotion? If it's something difficult and you've just had a cry, it's there. It's in your meridian system somewhere, waiting to be triggered into something big if it's not managed, or to later on metastasize into physical illness. So it's a process of really acknowledging the emotion, sitting with it. And, you know, I work with a South American shaman, as you know, and it's really challenging work. It's not work that's like, oh, this is all airy fairy fun stuff. I'm constantly faced with challenges because of this work. And the deeper I go into my spiritual journey, the more challenges I'm faced with and the more challenging it gets. And I remember last year having a really difficult shamanic death and deciding to go and sit in the garden. It was summer and I was experiencing a very difficult emotion at something and I just didn't know what to do with it. It was a really challenging situation. And I just took myself into the garden and I did this every night for 4 nights. And I told Daniel to just stay in the house, just stay away from me, just let me do it. And I just sat there, like literally the whole evening for like 3-4 hours, looking up at the sky, letting it wash over me, letting myself feel what does it feel like? I'm just going to feel it. And there's a very big difference between honoring your emotions and wallowing it, because wallowing in it, when you have honored them and you have allowed yourself to sit with it, because any emotion is a reason for us to look at something. It's there for a reason. The human brain and mind and consciousness is extremely evolved. And we get given these emotions for a specific reason in order to recognize something. So I really kind of let it wash over me and I honor it. I honor the reason it's there. I ask it why it's there. I say out loud, it hurts. I put my hand on wherever the energy is in the system, whether that's my stomach, my throat, my chest. And then I focus on visualizing myself moving it through the body, through and out the body. And I do that as many times as I need to do. That's when you don't wallow, because you really are experiencing everything the emotion is there to teach you. And so if I need to be feeling that emotion for a week, so be it. That's also okay. And I think that is a great lesson for my children as well.
Yeah.
To not just have to be, listen, I don't want to raise them to be miserable gits, but I want to raise them to know their emotions and to be able to say when something's wrong and really understand it.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us as parents to model that to our kids. Because if we're constantly pretending that we're fine in front of them, then they think that there's something wrong with their emotions and they think that they have to hide their emotions. Yeah. And then it just becomes this perpetual loop of people stuffing down their emotions and constantly pretending that I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Right. Well, this was Daniel's journey, you know, realizing that he had always repressed his own emotions because he didn't have any guidance on how to feel them. So it's only now he's learning how to really embody his emotional side.
By the way, I really enjoyed listening to your podcast episode with him. So for anybody listening to this, you should go check out. Lauren has her own podcast and she did an episode with her husband, Daniel. And it was really beautiful to listen to him opening up about his journey. And I really appreciated that because I think that it's so very necessary right now for more men to know that they're not alone in this type of journey, because more men are coming to it. And I think it's important for them to hear about other men experiencing it as well.
Yeah. So that's episode 73, I think it is, on Reconditioned, if you want to check that out.
Tell us about the Recondition Your Life Academy.
Oh, my baby, my life's purpose in one course. I realized that everything I've learned that led to my own wellness came about because of a complete holistic approach, as I keep saying. But I think it's difficult sometimes to understand what that really means. And it means a true, culmination of healing the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of self. And so I created a course that does that, where we go through, and it doesn't matter, women come to it from everyone that does the course has their own reason for doing it, and they're all different reasons. Some people are suffering with trauma, some people have got health concerns, some people are just in the no man's land of I'm not unhappy, I don't really know, or some people come to it because they're in a difficult marriage and maybe want to get out but don't know if they want to get out. Some people just don't know their purpose and really want to explore what that means. Some people are just new to inner work and just intuitively get guided and feel like, oh, this, I need to do something. And then they do it and they all have the same realizations that they all needed to do all the work to heal. So it doesn't matter what challenge they're coming to the table with, it all needs the same approach. So there are 12 modules in the course, and it's done live on Zoom over 12 weeks, once a week. And you do it alongside 10 other women, or 10 women in the course. And so the first module, we work through inner child, because that's really the first thing that we need to tackle to see where the limiting beliefs have come from, what blocks you're carrying, things that happen in your childhood that you might not even remember until you do the work. So we go really deep into that, and it's really powerful. Most women usually cry during that module because it's so powerful and it's so healing and challenging. But the beauty of the course is that you do it alongside these other women, and we have a WhatsApp group for each semester, and the chat's constantly going, everyone's supporting each other. We then move on to shadow work, which is also really enlightening for a lot of people, to really get introduced to their darker side and have an acknowledgement of that, where we understand about why we judge others, what we're judging in ourselves. And then we do a lot of work on self-love and self-acceptance. We do divine feminine healing. So really coming into the authenticity of who we are, and understanding why that's important, understanding our female cycles and how to truly move into that with an understanding of the being that we are. And I think it's another thing maybe we avoid. I've got my period, I'll put a tampon and I'll get on with my day. Understanding the cycle is so important to living within this ebb and flow of the universe that we've been speaking about. Module 5, we do ancestral healing, which is super powerful because we don't realize how much of our limiting beliefs and traumas are carried through the DNA. So we are holding on to the traumas of our ancestors. And until we let that go, a lot of that we are holding, and it's contributing to some of the decisions we're making or some of the difficulties in our lives. So that's a super powerful module. And then that's kind of the heavy stuff. And then we move on to brain training and learning how to really rewire these neural pathways in the brain to create new behaviors and a new identity, and how to really shift into the identity of the person that you want to be. And then we do a lot of work on purpose and really kind of helping the ladies. I've got a very powerful exercise that helps us really get to the bottom of what is our purpose. Who are you? Who am I? Because a lot of women come to the course and they're like, actually, because I say, if you take away your marital status, your parental status, and your job, who are you? And a lot of people will find that really difficult to answer. But we are not any of those titles. We are way more than that. So it's getting to the bottom of that. And then we do a lot of work on emotional intelligence. And at the end, we do health optimization. And I specifically leave that to the end because at this point, the women are empowered, believe that they can achieve anything. And so the idea of living with kind of a health optimization lifestyle doesn't feel as daunting anymore. So yeah, it's my life's purpose in one course, this course really. So I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I love every time a new semester starts and just get the most incredible group of ladies, and the growth, just watching the growth and the healing is just incredible.
I really enjoyed listening to you describing the modules, and I'm just so proud of you in the way that you've so beautifully brought together all your experiences and everything you've been through.
Well, thank
and
you.
to create this very special modality. I think that this is exactly what we need more of in the world, because there's so much of like this specific modality, that specific modality. And of course, we know that everybody is so unique, and different people do need different things. And not every modality of healing, whether it's physical or emotional, is for everybody. But I think what you've put together is so integrative and holistic, and a really beautiful way of doing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is. The course is unique in that way, because I don't think there is. I haven't come across anything else that really.
Neither have I.
Uses such a holistic approach, and from my journey of healing, I have learned that it really is the only thing that works. And you might see a coach and have some good results, but a year later or a few months later, there's going to be something else that crops up. And it might be in a different aspect of self. So you might have seen a coach for your self-worth. Maybe you feel really low in self-worth, and then maybe a year later you get health concern, and then you need a different approach and a different sort of coach and a different mentor for this. And so this really encapsulates everything and really helps you heal everything from the root cause, whether that is physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. So it's quite unique in that sense. And it comes about because I realized in my own healing, like, okay, what's the missing piece here? Why am I not fully healed yet?
Yeah.
And it was all those missing pieces. It had to be a complete holistic approach.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Because I mean, as you know, I also have such a vast array of interests and things that I do in my job, and have so many times been told by various different people that I do too many different things, and I need focus, and I must pick one thing and be good at that thing. And I always rebel against that idea. There's always been something in me saying, no, I don't know why yet, but all of these things are important for some reason. And it's really over the last while that I've started to see how it all truly fits together. And once you see that it fits together, it seems quite ridiculous to have ever thought any other way.
Yeah, that's following your intuition, isn't it? And I think, in business, that's difficult because you're told niche down and, just create this one. When I first started with the course, and every single module of the course came to me in meditation, which is why I was so inspired by it. And I knew, okay, this is it. This is the thing.
Yeah.
This is my purpose, to get everything I've learned down into one space to help people heal. But then everyone in business is like, well, how are you going to sell that? Because, it's everything. How you need to have a niche. Well, that is my niche.
Yeah, I've been told that so many times as well. No, you can't sell that because it's too many things. You can't explain that. So
can't. I just believe that we can manifest anything we want into happening. I'll just you'll be over there with your business advice, and I'll be over here just manifesting the shit out of my life.
Yeah. No, that's why I've loved watching how you've just flown with this course, and selling out month after month. I mean, you do the course every couple of months, every 3 months?
It's every 3 months. Yeah, so it's a 12-week course. Yeah.
And it's been really great to just watch you going with that and trusting yourself with it, and how well it's done, and the beautiful results that it's giving your clients.
Thank you.
So well done. I love watching women not be put in a box.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so, I just think, especially women in business, in the wellness industry, and I hate this, in the wellness industry, it becomes almost like a thing. I'm just in my own box over here doing my own thing, kind of seen as being in the wellness industry, but I'm in the Lauren industry. I'm just, No, I agree. I just think why do we put ourselves in boxes? Why don't we just create whatever comes naturally to us to create? Because that's our gift to the world.
Exactly. Okay, my friend, I'm going to wrap us up.
Okay, well, it's been a joy as usual.
Always is. We'll have to do more. So many more subjects to explore.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. No matter how many times I hear it, I always find your story very inspiring. And, we were talking about either being in that victimhood mentality or empowering yourself. And I think nobody can look at your life and what you've gone through and blame you at all for having been in victimhood. But the fact that you have turned your life around so incredibly beautifully to not just be okay, but to be thriving and now teaching other women how to do it as well. That really proves that it doesn't matter how bad things have been. They can always be better, and you can make that choice. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Taking responsibility for our own well-being. That is my parting message.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram @rain.dunn or email me on rain@raindunn.com. To learn more about my different services and offers and explore how we can work together to help you find more vibrance and expansion in your life, visit my website, raindunn.com.